Welcome to another edition of Recruiter Fuel. This is all about a community of professional recruiters supporting other recruiters. And there's really three promises we make in every session. Number one is to address problems that we have in the recruiting industry and create them into opportunities. Number two is how do we avoid some of these problems? And here's the kicker for every edition we do. Number three is about giving you one practical piece of advice that you as a professional recruiter can take back to your organization and implement today. Welcome to Recruiter Fuel. So we have a new guest with us today, Jennifer Sula. Thank you for joining us today, Jennifer, on Recruiter Fuel.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So nobody's ever seen you before on video, at least not under Recruiter Fuel. So tell the audience a little bit about you and what your background is.
Absolutely. So I recently came on board with Qualigence.
Okay.
I have 8 years of recruiting background between nonprofit, higher education, and the corporate sector. So I have had a chance to hear many candidate stories and help change their lives, which is pretty neat.
Where did you most recently come from?
Amazon.
Oh, you were recruiting for the big A.
I was recruiting with Uncle Jeff, helping out Amazon operations.
That's one way to put it, Uncle Jeff. Okay, so 8 years in recruiting. So question number two, and I like to ask every person that joins us the same questions. You know, what's something specific about the recruiting business that you just love?
The people, connecting them with what they're most passionate about, and then being able to hear their stories. For me, we have the honor of actually narrating, kind of being the guide for their stories when we're telling our clients about that particular candidate and about what they have done, their experiences. So just being able to capture their story and hear what they've done and how far they've come in their journeys is always inspirational.
How did you get into the business in the first place 8 years ago?
It was an accident.
I think we probably all of us would say that at some point or another.
Definitely. I think that's the neat part is everybody has an unconventional way of getting into the business.
Yeah.
So for me, it started with nonprofit and actually asking donors to contribute to the mission or the vision, whatever their heart kind of was most passionate about for an organization. And that made me realize I loved the relationship building. I loved being able to connect people with the things that matter the most to them. And before I knew it, I was changing industries and said, why not start out in the recruiting industry?
Well, that passion for helping people, that makes sense that you got into recruiting. And I'm assuming, and we'll get into your background a little bit more, that you've had both some really good experiences and some maybe not so great experiences on the recruiting side with the companies that you've worked for.
Definitely. I have seen both sides of the coin.
So what's the second side of the coin? So we talked about some of the good experiences. Without saying who, the company, what's some of the bad experiences you've had in recruiting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say right off the bat, definitely when you feel like you're just putting people in positions because of metrics and data.
Button seat.
Yes, but you're not actually getting a chance to see, are they qualified for that position? Would it be something that's a win-win for both your client and the candidate? And for me, retention's important. So there's nothing worse than a candidate gets placed in that position. It's not what they thought, and that's their career that they're placing in your hands. They're entrusting you with a really major step. So it's unfortunate when I've seen that side of the coin where they're not necessarily being provided
Button seat, so
quality.
I get credit for that button seat, but beyond that, it may not be the right career move for them. The client may not be happy with them in the long run. There's all kinds of issues based on the way recruiting is structured today.
Oh, definitely. I think especially from the interview side as well, as I feel like nobody wants to feel like they talk to a robot, they want to talk to a person. So I think I've been with companies that are very structured in their interview process, almost to the point where you don't get to know the person because you feel like you have to focus on those specific questions. And for me, it's more of a conversation. I want to get to know their story. I want to get to know who they are, why they do what they do.
Yeah, what's driving them in the first place.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, I think that's an important way to connect. Now, I've been talking to a lot of business leaders. This is, again, another question I ask every recruiter, professional recruiter that I connect with, that we can't find enough candidates. I mean, I think what I saw yesterday, just in the retail sector, there's like 1 million jobs open. But then go beyond that, there's something like 7.9 million jobs out there, and companies are saying, I can't find enough candidates. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a real issue right now. I think it's something that's unique. I think it's an awesome challenge for us to be involved in the midst of a post-pandemic, because whenever in your career you're going to say that you've seen that, you've been exposed to that. I think it's very comparable to the housing market in a lot of senses. You have a buyer's market and a seller's market. I think right now it used to be an employer market, and now it's more geared towards the candidate side. and figuring out their opportunities. I think retention's a big piece of that.
Sure.
So for any employers, my biggest piece of advice would be listen to your employees, listen to their needs, listen to their wants, take that feedback and do your best to implement that from a retention side. Just especially for the best talent that you have, retaining that talent.
I think retention is absolutely critical, because if you're not losing that many people, then you don't have to recruit that many people. It becomes more incremental growth stuff. But let's think about it from a recruiter's perspective. So that's advice you'd give to an organization to retain their people. But given the market where it is now, I mean, I looked on LinkedIn this morning when I first got up, and there must have been, I don't know, in my feed alone, 1,500 posts of recruiters saying I'm recruiting for this job or I'm recruiting for that job. And they're all kind of getting lost in the shuffle because there's so many of them.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, right? I mean, think about it from a candidate's perspective. If I'm being targeted by 18,000 recruiters, obviously I'm being a little sarcastic there.
But you don't know which one do I respond to? Where do I start?
That's exactly it. So from a recruiter's perspective, Jen, what's a one or two pieces of advice? Because the show is all about helping recruiters become better recruiters, giving them something practical they can take away and employ in their organization tomorrow to recruit or today to recruit. What's one or two pieces of advice you'd give to a professional recruiter watching this right now?
Absolutely. I think relationships are everything. So I think a lot of times we look at the standard traditional ways of recruiting, and so we tap into LinkedIn and we tap into just what we're used to, in a sense. So I would say get out of your comfort zone and find outside of the box creative ways to be able to potentially connect with those candidates.
Like what?
In a way that's indirect. So for me, a lot of times it's building the relationships I've built with clients, professional organizations, nonprofits. Maybe that's hosting a volunteer event with a nonprofit and being able to serve as a sponsor. Maybe that's a lunch and learn session where you do interview tips and you do resume workshops and you're being able to help candidates that are in the search and trying to figure out where to start when it comes to their professional background.
Sure.
I think in a lot of sense a social media campaign. So if there is a client that you're working with, why not have them feature you as a part of their social media campaign and be able to help candidates with, interview tips and prep and being able to kind of serve as a partnership on that level. So I think that's a neater way that you can kind of go about an outside of the box approach.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. I'm a recruiter. I have 400 recs open. I ain't got time for an event. I ain't got time for a social media campaign. What would you say to me?
I would say make the time.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I think
fair
it can be easy in our industry to focus on your open requisitions and to have, in a sense, that pressure to fill those positions.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to also be maintaining those relationships outside of just the candidates that you're speaking to with the organizations that you have a chance, community organizations especially. You want to make sure that you're giving back to the community and you're helping those, in that way.
I've talked about this on some of the previous videos that we've done, and on the Recruitment Education Institute website, we have a number of videos about recruiters branding themselves. How do you build your own brand? How do you become more well-known? And I get so many people that say, well, I don't have the time to do that. And I agree with you. You don't have the opportunity not to do that. If you're not building the brand, you're getting lost in a sea of other recruiters reaching out. So you've got to spend some time, whether it's networking at an event that's building your brand, whether it's your own LinkedIn profile and what you're an expert at, it's building your brand. And it actually, in my opinion, helps you become a better recruiter. Yes, it's a little bit of time up front, but I don't think you can afford not to do it.
I think the ROI is tremendous,
Yeah.
especially when you're at a job fair. I think a lot of recruiters look at it as candidates are going to come to me and they're going to be engaged. And yes, you want to find ways to pull them in, but I'm all about reverse tabling. Go and find those that you want to be able to talk to and bring them over.
So
to
get
the
out from
table.
behind the table and actually go talk to people.
Yes.
Yeah, I rarely see that happen at a job fair. I see everybody sitting behind the table, to your point, and there's a whole line of candidates, but are they the right, maybe they're the right candidate, but you're saying go after and find the right one.
Right, because even if you don't, worst case scenario, you jump into conversation and you get a referral at the end of it and they have somebody that they can connect you with. Or you build another relationship with a community partner or a nonprofit organization, or getting a chance to be able to give back to an upcoming workshop. So I feel like there's always opportunity. It's just up to you to figure out what that's going to look like.
I think that's a good practical piece of advice. Is there another kind of one other thing that you're using today, you're employing today, or you would tell to a recruiter that you just hired as part of your team, think about this as a practical approach given the economy that we're in right now?
I feel like being a mentor and being able to utilize, if you have interns that are coming into your company, that's a great way, especially if your time is limited, to be able to use that team, have them be able to go out and be the face and the brand of the company at those different events. So if they do have the ability to be able to train, to help develop those that are coming in and be able to delegate some of those responsibilities, that's one piece. If it is like a smaller company, I think that my advice would be figure out how you can best utilize your resources. And sometimes you're wearing many different hats,
Yeah.
but figure out what your priorities are. I think that's where your sourcing strategy comes in. And just have a brainstorming session, whether that is just with your team to figure out like what are new ways we can get ourselves out there. I think a lot of times we miss the opportunity just in being in the weeds of everything to be able to sit down and have those conversations with our team in a more of a fun brainstorming way of how can we get ourselves out there in a different way.
Sure. I mean, recruiters are so inundated, as we've already talked about. I think knowing where to get help on the outside without just handing over the entire search to an agency and paying all these huge fees, that's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for either.
Absolutely. You know? If you can utilize, especially if you are like a smaller business, that's something I have a heart for, is make sure that you're figuring out what are some unique ways that you can leverage that and that you can really make that work for you.
Yeah, some really great advice for the recruiters that are actually watching. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being able to come on to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks everybody for watching. Again, Recruiter Fuel is a community of recruiters that support other recruiters. If you've got an idea that you want to share with the recruiting community, please reach out to me directly. If you want to make sure you get notified of all of our upcoming videos, click the link on the screen in front of you, sign up, and you'll be notified for every new video. Again, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you, Jen. Thank you so much for being able to share some of those words of wisdom. And again, if you're watching and you've got something you want to share, let us know, and if appropriate, we'll have you on the show itself. Welcome to Recruiter Fuel, and welcome to the community.